throughout the topic. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Middle East. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a major strike on Houthi leaders in Yemen, calling it a historic blow to the terrorist regime in Sana'a. He has said that the Israeli Defense Forces target senior officials during a speech by Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi, who often threatens Israel. Netanyahu has vowed that this strike is just the beginning and promises to continue hitting senior officials. He has also confirmed the recovery of 2 fallen Israeli hostages, Idan Shtivi and Ilan Weiss, honoring them as heroes who tried to save others during the October 7, 2023 attack. In response, now Yemen's Houthis vow to intensify attacks on Israel. Let's listen in to what the Israeli Prime Minister has said.
ביום חמישי האחרון אני הוריתי לצה"ל לתקוף את ממשלת הטרור שלהם בתימן. חיל האוויר תקף את כינוס בכירי משטר הטרור בצנעא. הם באותו זמן צפו בנאום של מנהיג החות'ים עבד אל-מאלכ אל-חותי. והאל-חותי נוהג להבטיח בכל נאום כזה שהוא יכה את ישראל, שהוא ישמיד את ישראל, הם חרטו את זה לדגל שלהם. אז ההבטחה הזאת לא תתממש. אבל ההבטחה שלנו להכות את משטר הטרור ביתר שאת היא מתממשת, ועוד איך היא מתממשת. במכה קטלנית צה"ל חיסל את רוב הממשלה של החות'ים ובכירים נוספים מהדרג הצבאי, ואני מזכיר לכם גם שקואליציה שלמה של מדינות העולם פעלו נגדם. אבל אנחנו עושים את מה שאף אחד לא עשה לפנינו, וזוהי רק ההתחלה של מכת הבכירים בצנעא. אנחנו נגיע לכולם.
For this discussion, we're joined by Dan Perry. He's a world affairs expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us and waiting throughout this news. Now looking at this, how might this action reshape the balance of power in Yemen and affect diplomatic efforts to stabilize the country or to stabilize this region? Also, could this complicate or catalyze regional negotiations?
The fundamental question is whether the Houthis are deterrable, and you know it's generally thought that pretty close to no, they're not, because their fanaticism is maximal. Their hostility to Israel and to the West and to the world order that cannot be exaggerated. Their indifference to the misery that counterattacks on them might bring to the Yemeni people is total. And they also appear to have a death wish. They seem to be the type of terrorist that is not hypocritical and that doesn't mind dying themselves and is not merely indifferent to the deaths of their people. So I'm not sure they can be deterred, short of actually killing every single last one of them. Remember that the Houthis have brought unbelievable amounts of death and devastation to Yemen itself. They've managed to to kick out the internationally recognized, problematic, but recognized government out of the southwest of the country, control the port of Hodeidah, the capital of Sana'a, and some very important assets in between. I don't know if this blow will be decisive. Abdul Malik al-Houthi is the actual leader. He's the one who may be irreplaceable. But you know, the Houthi sister organizations, for example, like Hezbollah, were very significantly decapitated about a year ago. And there were those who thought that the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, was irreplaceable and Hezbollah would fall apart without him. Now, they're much degraded. And Naim Qassem, his successor, is not nearly as charismatic or as respected or as feared. But Hezbollah is still refusing, or at least as of this moment, they are standing firm in their refusal to disarm, as the Lebanese government finally is asking of them to do. And it seems to me unlikely that the Houthis are going to just surrender because half their government was wiped out and the head of their military. My assessment is that it will go on. What could change is because of the damage that has been done, not just by Israel, but by the US and the UK and other powers to installations that the Houthis depend on, both the airport in Sana'a, the seaport, in Hodeidah, various other infrastructure, energy facilities, missile launching facilities, even though those are mainly hidden and mobile. It's conceivable that the recognized government, with the help perhaps of the Saudis, might make another effort to retake Sana'a. I know that the Houthis have more or less respected their commitment to the U.S. not to attack maritime shipping headed up to the Suez Canal, which had been devastating to the tune of many billions of dollars of lost revenue to Egypt. That agreement was reached a few months ago, and I think they've respected that mostly, but the U.S. forgot to ask the Houthis to stop firing missiles at Israel. And that is basically at the core of what happened here over the weekend. Israel has simply had enough, and they keep raising the ante. It's conceivable that the Houthis want to go to Israel into the kind of attacks on Yemen that create great civilian damage, the way I'm sad to say Israel has walked into that trap in Gaza. And maybe they're hoping that if many Yemenis die, then they can also contribute to the global, to the diminution of the Israeli brand that basically has happened around the world because of what goes on in Gaza. Maybe they want to contribute to that with the blood of thousands of Yemenis. I don't rule that out. I suspect, though, that it could get worse before it gets better.
Right, and then with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promising continued operation, what do you think, what risk does this pose for Israel in particular and its international standing? How might this affect Israel's relations with maybe key allies involved in Yemen?
Well, if you're referring to the further attacks in Yemen, I think there's broad international support for those attacks, frankly. I mean, everyone, pretty much, except for perhaps the Iranians, is fed up with the Houthis and their interference in global maritime trade. I mean, remember they're at war with Saudi Arabia for much of the past decade. So the Gulf countries are not upset with Israel for degrading the Houthis, certainly not the UAE or Saudi Arabia. I don't think Egypt is. Egypt, as I say, suffered economically from the Houthis' recklessness to the tune of many billions. The West isn't that upset. I think where Israel might get into trouble is if it ends up causing civilian damage and killing many civilians in Yemen. I hope they are clever, smart, and moral enough to avoid doing that. They clearly failed to not cross that threshold in Gaza, where the war has become so ruinous that Israel's international standing has very much suffered. Yemen is a little bit different. In the case of Yemen, there isn't this complex Israeli-Palestinian conflict going back a century. I mean, Hamas is completely diabolical, and they started this war. But the bigger picture is that Israel and Palestinians are a very messy national conflict or intercommunal conflict. That doesn't exist with Yemen. Israel has no beef with Yemen, and Yemen should have none with Israel. But the Houthis are fanatics, armed by Iran, and essentially a death cult. Remember that their slogan on their flags and placards is "Death to Israel, death to America." What on earth did America do to the Houthis in Yemen? That's just the way it is with these jihadist militias in the region, and I think Israel needs to be careful in prosecuting their legitimate gripe against the Houthis continuing to fire missiles at Israel. They need to be careful to not kill civilians in Yemen.
Right. Thank you very much, Dan Perry, for joining us and sharing your insight throughout this topic as a world affairs expert. Thank you very much. This is all we have time for. We will continue this special coverage on the SCO